Hello friends, I welcome you again to this course titled as Introduction to Indian Writing in English. Friends, we are on Unit 11 and in the last class we started a very important award-winning text in Indian writing in English. The name of the text is The Inheritance of Loss by Kiran Desai. In the last class, we discussed the detailed plot, how the story moved forward, and what is the condition of the characters at the end of the story. Whether it is Judge or Biju or Sai or Gyan or Cook, how these characters have changed their life because of their acts, because of their behavior. These are the major characters about whom I am talking in this lecture. There are other minor characters also whose, let's say, discussion is not much required in the end of the story. Basically, the ending is about the cultural clashes and, let's say, the differences between people, the differences of ideology, the differences of, let's say, their opinions. There is identity crisis in the story, and how, let's say, in this critical scenario of let's say protesters who want the rights for Nepalis, who want jobs for Nepalis, and all these people were protesting in the Kalimpong region where the entire story is set, where the house of Judge is located and he is living there with his granddaughter Sai. In this lecture, we will look at the characters and characterization. How these characters are able, let's say, to justify their role in the story. How these characters are able to, let's say, move the story to an extent where we can understand the level of trauma or the level of confusion in the, let's say, in this entire scenario. But before moving to the characterization and different characters, let me tell you about the outcome of this lecture. What are you going to learn from this lecture? You would be able to analyze the role of various characters in the formation of the novel. Friends, I told you in the last class that this novel is formed on the problem of immigration, the problem of, let's say, fortune and misfortune, the problem which comes into a person's life because of wrong actions. If we take the, let's say, case of Cook, the cook took the action of sending his son Biju to America for his better future. But what happened at the end? Biju, the entire money from him is taken by the robbers in the way, and he has to move back to Kalimpong, from where he started the journey of his life with nothing in his hands. And now the journey ended with nothing. So whatever problems these characters have faced in their life, somewhere it can be, let's say, analyzed that these characters have learnt nothing from all these, let's say, examples, from all these situations, from all these circumstances. Rather, they are still trying to make their life complex. And this is something which makes this novel realistic. In reality also, friends, we have seen that the people who do not know about their future, who do not get proper guidance, what to do and what not to do, they make their life complex. One after the other stages they cross, and in those complexities, their life, let's say, is completely ruined. They are completely shattered, they are completely collapsed in the last stages of their life. And thus, at the end, they die in frustration. Let us try to analyze the major and minor characters of this novel, The Inheritance of Loss, in the light of these arguments. The first character is the judge. The name of the judge is Jemu Bhai. So let us try to understand about the life and the acts of this judge. He is called as Jemu Bhai or Jemu in flashback scenes. The judge is the head of the household at Cho Oyu and Sai's grandfather. Now, friends, as I told you that there is a stream of consciousness which is keep on happening in the, let's say, inner conscience of the judge. The judge is going to the flashback, thinking about the activities, thinking about the characters related to his past life, and then coming back to the present. So, this judge, he lives in the present time, he lives in the house. The name of the house is Cho Oyu, with his daughter, whose name is granddaughter, whose name is Sai. He grows up in a family belonging to the peasant caste, who pour all of their resources into ensuring that he gets a good education. Friends, the father and mother of this judge, they are very kind people. They poured all their, let's say, the blessings and, let's say, earned lot of money to send this judge to Cambridge for higher education. He attends a mission school and then goes on to Cambridge University on a scholarship, aiming to join the Indian Civil Service. We discussed it, that judge was a topper in his school. He was a very intelligent student. Then he went to Cambridge on a scholarship, and then he joined thereafter Indian Civil Service as a judge. Before leaving, he marries 14-year-old Nimmy in order to gain a dowry, though the two do not consummate the marriage. So, initially, they were not able to make relationship with each other. Judge was married to Nimmy because he wanted some money for going to abroad. In Cambridge, even though he is viewed as an outsider, he tries to imitate British culture. He passes his exam and is accepted to the ICS. So, we discussed that the condition of judge was not so good at Cambridge. He was ignored. He was treated as outsider. He had no friends. He spent lot of time in studies and finally qualified the exam and accepted into ICS. When he returns to India, he is humiliated when she steals his powder puff and in retaliation rapes her. We discussed this incident also, that the judge's wife steals powder puff, because she wanted the well-being of her husband. She wanted the good health of her husband. But in, let's say, contrast, judge beats her and rapes her on taking his puff. The judge spends much of the rest of their marriage abusing her and trying to strip her to her Indianness. If we talk about the young age of judge before the, let's say, the death of his wife, he kept on physically molesting her because he wanted her to behave like a European woman. But she was a true Indian in her appearance, in her behavior, in her, let's say, attitude. He disliked her, and which is why he used to beat her various times. He eventually sends her away, fearing that he will kill her. So finally, we saw that the judge, he sent her away from his house because he thought that he is so frustrated on his wife that on some day he will beat and he will kill her. In the present, the judge is a deliberate, angry old man filled with self-loathing because he is accepted by neither British culture nor his own society. Friends, when the story comes back to the present, comes out from the flashback of judge, we came to know that still judge is a frustrated person. He is an angry old man. He is filled with self-obsession. He thinks that he is always right. He do not want to listen others. He is neither accepted by British culture nor his own society. Why? Because Britishers ignored him and he ignored Indians. So, there is no point in, let's say, not making a healthy relationship with either of the communities. His one solace comes from the company of his dog, Mutt, and eventually his granddaughter. So, friends, in the present time, the only comfort in the life of the judge is because of the presence of his dog Mutt and his granddaughter Saeed. So these two people are there to console him, to comfort him, with whom he can share his feelings, etc. The judge serves as the primary character who experiences colonization firsthand. Friends, this judge is an example of, let's say, the isolation, the alienation which comes into the mind of a person from colonized country. The judge was from India. In India, most of the people were influenced from the British rule. The British recently left India, and there were many Indians who wanted to become like Britishers. They appreciated Britishers, and judge was one of them. He didn't understand that Britishers exploited Indians. They hated Indians. So there is no point in behaving like Britishers, like Europeans. But the judge had no vision to understand and to analyze this problem, and thus he cannot be considered as a true patriot for India. Though he benefits from it, he must also come in terms with his abuse of his wife and the oppression he has inflicted on others because he was forced to adopt British culture. Friends, it might happen that initially the judge was a very, let's say, kind person. But when he was sent to, let's say, Cambridge, and there he felt humiliation, he was avoided by the people. This kind of negative attitude came into his nature. And thus, this force of adopting British culture might have, let's say, inflicted into his personality, which is why he used to abuse his wife and he used to oppress her. So we can understand that how much complexities this migration from one country to another country creates into a person's mind. The rootlessness can lead to ruining of a person. The person initially is a positive, let's say, thinker. But after having the abroad experiences, he converts himself into, let's say, a negative personality. So, the character of Judge is portrayed in the story with all kind of, let's say, ill effects of colonial society or colonialism. Let us move to the next character, whose name is Saeed. Saeed is the judge's granddaughter. Before arriving at Cho OU, she had attended St. Augustine's convent, where she was anglicized, taught British customs and ideas, just as the judge had been. So, the granddaughter, she was taught the similar kind of British customs and ideas at her school, which judge had learnt while his, let's say, stay in Cambridge. At age 8, Saeed's mother and Saeed's father are killed in a bus accident, and the nuns bring Saeed to Cho OU to live with her grandfather, whom she had never met previously. So, we can understand, friends, that judge's, let's say, son, he has also left him. So, judge used to live alone, and when Saeed brought first to the judge's house, Cho OU, Saeed was also not aware that this person, judge, is her grandfather. She never met him previously. Over the years, she becomes friends with Noni, who tutors her, Lola, Father Bhuti, and Uncle Potty, the judge's neighbors, who are also upper class and who share English traditions with her, like celebrating Christmas and listening to the BBC. Now, because of her school education, Saeed is well fitted and she settled herself in the house and locality of judge. Most of the people who were their neighbors, they are elite, they behaved like Europeans, they behaved like Britishers. They used to, let's say, talk in English. They used to behave like Europeans. They used to celebrate Christmas. They used to listen BBC. And all those English customs and, let's say, ways of living, they were already adapted by Saeed in her schooling. So, she, let's say, quickly became friendly with the people like Noni, Lola, Father Bhuti, Uncle Potty, etc. The judge is stern with Saeed, and so she feels closer to the cook, who often treats her like a daughter. Friends, although Saeed was quickly adjusted in the house of the judge, but the problem is that the affection which she expected in the absence of her parents, that affection, that love, that warmth is not given to her, is not provided to her by her grandfather who was judge, but rather she got all these, let's say, this console, this affection from the cook who was the servant in the family. When Saeed is 16, she gets a new tutor, Gyan. So earlier Saeed was taught by Noni, and then a new tutor appeared in, let's say, that house, whose name is Gyan. The two have a fast and full romance before realizing that their cultural differences are too great. In this process of studying from Gyan, Saeed gets attracted to Gyan, and then Gyan also gets attracted to Saeed. But there is a huge difference between the financial status and cultural, let's say, lifestyle of Sai and Gyan. Gyan belonged to a very poor family. He was, in a true sense, a local Nepali. On the other hand, Sai was accustomed to European beliefs and ways of living. Sai is naive and somewhat self-absorbed, but she is also smart and understands that many of Gyan's issues with her have little to do with her and more to do with the circumstances of her upbringing and her privilege. So friends, Sai was in a way little mature than Gyan. She knew that if there is some dispute arisen between Gyan and Sai, those disputes are created not because of some, let's say, some behavior of Sai, but the customs which she had learnt, being an Indian, behaving like European, all these things which she had learnt from the judge and in her school, and the circumstances of the boy Gyan. It is because of those differences, economic differences, it is because of those, let's say, cultural differences, that there is some dispute which arose between Sai and Gyan. We have third character in the story whose name is Biju. Biju is cook's son. At the cook's urging, Biju travels to New York in order to earn money and make a better life for the family's future generation. Friends, just like many poor people think in India, these people want to send their children to the, let's say, to America, to European countries, to abroad, because they want their children to earn more and more money. They themselves were not able to, let's say, achieve something in their life, and they want to look at those dreams, those fulfillments in the life of their children. So same happened in the case of Cook. Cook expected his son Biju to become very famous, to become very rich, and thus he sent his son to New York City to make money, to earn money, and to make a better life. The life which Cook was not able to live in the house Choyu. He hopes from one restaurant job to another, either due to green card inspection, customer complaint about his smell, or his own distaste for the business owner and customers. Now friends, when Biju went to America, he was not able to settle down in that culture. Maybe because he was an, let's say, illegal immigrant, he had no green card. So in good restaurants, all the employees must have the green card. So he was thrown out of those places. Somewhere customers complained that there is a smell coming out from the food which he cooked, or the smell exists in his skin, in his body. Maybe he became the victim of this discrimination. So there are various reasons, but because of all those reasons, he was not able to, let's say, settle down and earn money and become satisfied from his job. Somewhere he himself left the job because the non-vegetarian food was served and he was a pure vegetarian. So ultimately, let's say, the customers' expectations were not fulfilled by Biju while working. He comes to confront his own bias in globalized America when he meets Saeed, a Pakistani man he admires. Friends, Biju was also biased. Just like common Indians, he used to believe that Pakistanis are his enemies. But when he met Saeed, he was able to admire him thinking that not all the people are same. If a person belongs to the other religion, if Biju is Hindu and the person with whom he is talking is a Muslim, then it doesn't mean that the Muslim will be the enemy of Hindu. Biju was slowly learning how to expose into the international or metropolitan culture. He was learning about, let's say, how to survive in these metropolitan cities. And his mind, let's say, is expanding. Biju also recognizes his own values. He quits his job at a restaurant that serves steak because he realizes that he needs to live according to the principles of his family and his religion. So there is one incident where the job was okay, the owner was okay, but Biju was not able to survive at that place because of the serving of non-vegetarian food. So he has to leave that place. He proved that he had the roots of his family lying within him, and under the, let's say, influence of those principles and under the restrictions of his religion, he left that place. This then brings him to Gandhi Cafe, where he meets Harish Hari. So he, let's say, reaches to a new place, that is Gandhi's Cafe. He meets a person, Harish Hari, there. Biju is optimistic and at times gullible, but he also becomes worn down by the life of an illegal immigrant in New York City, whom he calls a shadow class. So friends, slowly in his life, Biju has learnt that he is an outsider in America. He is a shadow class. We can understand that similar feelings might have emerged into the mind of Judge also, when he was treated as an outsider in Cambridge. Judge also might have felt that he is a shadow class, he is an outsider in Cambridge. Biju is having the similar kind of feelings when he is neglected in America and he thought himself as a shadow class, as an outsider in New York City. Eventually, Biju becomes so exhausted from being overworked and taken advantage of that he decided to return to India, even though he knows he will likely disappoint his father. Now finally, friends, Biju understood that he is being exploited by the restaurant owners and cafe owners because he was an illegal immigrant. He was given overwork. He was completely exhausted. He was not well paid. People were taking advantage of his condition there. And which is why he decides to go back to India. He had in his mind that he is going to disappoint his father, which is why he purchases many gifts for his father, although he was not able to give them to him. But there was a condition of dilemma in his mind. He knew that in this condition, he will not be able to make his father happy. Biju thus embodies the yearning for home that many of the characters experience. So, Biju had that kind of homesickness, urge to go back to his house, a rootlessness, alienation which forces him to go back to India. We have another character in the story whose name is Cook. The name somewhere in one instance it is revealed, rather than most of the time he is called as Cook only. The judge's cook and Biju's father. The cook had worked for the judge since he was 14 years old, and his servant status is very much ingrained in him. So friends, Cook, when joined the house of judge, he was 14 years old. So that, let's say, the cookness in him, the servantness in him is, let's say, completely mixed up. His personality is completely ingrained into the work which he is doing. He does whatever the judge asks, though the judge often abuses him verbally and at the end of the novel physically. Friends, we see that in this story, the condition of Cook is not very good. Most of the time, judge abuses him verbally, and at the end, when the judge is not able to find his dog, he beats Cook very bitterly. So, the cook was also facing a kind of trauma. He was also a victim of physical and mental torture in the story. While he understands his own place, the cook also works hard to make sure that his son Biju can have a better life in America. So friends, just like the judge, the cook was also dissatisfied from his lifestyle. He had some dreams and aspirations which he was not able to live. So he wanted his son to live like that. He wanted his son to earn lot of money and to give a comfortable life to his father. Which is why the cook was very willing to send his son Biju to America for better life. He has a minor illegal business selling liquor on the side in order to make a small sum of additional money. Now friends, this cook, he also used to sell illegal liquor because he wanted to get some extra money, additional money. He was not well paid in the house of the judge. He is proud hearing from his son, hopping from job to job, knowing that his own hard work has paid off. So friends, the cook was, let's say, proud that his son is working at different places in America. The cook has ruined his life in working with the judge. He did not get much exposure in his life, but his son is getting that exposure. Even though the cook is often humiliated by other characters, he has a streak of vanity as well. So friends, we cannot say that the cook was always, let's say, humiliated by others. But he has some good things also in his life. Like he is appreciated by Saeed in the story. He was a fatherly figure for Saeed. But even then we can say that he lived like a dissatisfied soul. He exaggerates his position as well as the judge's wealth and kindness in order to make himself feel better about working for the judge. So friends, we can say that this character cook, he exaggerates somewhere his position. He tells lies that he is very happy in this job, he is very comfortable, and then he exaggerates about judge's wealth, that judge is a very rich person and very kind person. He is not doing this to, let's say, console others, but he wanted to console himself, that he is satisfied in working with the judge. He was living in the dual worlds, the world of dissatisfaction in reality and the world of satisfaction in illusion. The primary characterization of the cook, however, is as a servant. The judge and the cook, though they have spent more time with each other than with anyone else, have no personal familiarity. So friends, we can understand that although Cook joined the house of judge as a cook when he was 14 years old, they have lived with each other, the judge and the cook, for many years, but there is no personal intimacy, there is no familiarity, there is no, let's say, emotional attachment between the servant and the master. This is reinforced in the novel's writing, as the cook's name Panna Lal is not revealed until the second to last page of the novel, when his son returns. So friends, we can understand that the judge never took the name of the cook. The name was Panna Lal. Why? Because judge wanted to give a message to the cook that the cook will remain a cook for him throughout his life. He never wanted to make, let's say, a healthy relationship with him by calling him as Panna Lal, by calling him a human being who had some identity. But the identity of the cook is associated with his profession, that is cooking food for judge and his family. Which is why judge always called him, addressed him as a cook, but not as a Panna Lal. He does not become a fully realized person then until he is reunited with his son. Friends, in this story we saw that the cook was dissatisfied till his son knocks at the door. When the cook opens the door, he was few minutes back beaten by judge, and now he sees his son in front of him. There is a sudden outburst of emotions. He feels that there is someone with whom he can share the feelings. The cook is now dissatisfied working with the judge. He do not want to remain at this house after being beaten by the judge. But he had no option left. When the son of the cook reaches to the house, the cook finds a ray of hope. He thinks that now his son has come back and now his son will take care of him. So the son is treated as a ray of hope, and which is why the dawn strikes at that point when the father and the son meet each other. We have another character in the story whose name is Gyan. Saeed's 20-year-old Nepali math tutor, though their relationship blooms into a romance. So Saeed, I told you earlier also that he is 20 years old, he is a Nepali, he teaches math and he teaches Saeed, although there is a relationship, romantic relationship which occurs between Saeed and Gyan. Gyan begins the novel as naive as Saeed, but eventually he matures due to the GNLF movement that arises in Kalimpong. So friends, in the beginning of the story, we saw that Saeed is a graduate. But then he, let's say, when meets Saeed and when he, let's say, joins this GNLF movement, he becomes a man. It matures his personality, and thus this place Kalimpong becomes a place of a, let's say, graduate person converted from a boy to a man. He recognizes that he shares many of their complaints and concerns and marches in protest with them. So when this person Gyan, he hears that there is a, let's say, the people in the GNLF movement, they are addressing their complaints, Gyan thinks that he had similar kind of complaints. He had similar kind of concerns. So why can't he join this group and become a revolutionary? After this political awakening, Gyan becomes frustrated at Saeed's innocence and cultural elitism. So friends, when Gyan, let's say, came to know more and more about this movement, he started understanding that there are too many differences between him and Saeed. Saeed is very much innocent. She do not have much exposure to the world. She is a cultural elite. She has her ways of living. She has her ways of behaving. And thus, Gyan is completely different from her in terms of personality. He betrays her for the moment by telling his friends that the judge has guns at his house and no telephone leading to the robbery of Cho OU. Now this person, Gyan, he betrays the judge's house because he was teaching this girl, Sai, there. So he gives this information to the boys from this movement that they can get the guns from the house of this judge, earning money. Eventually, Gyan becomes racked with guilt and tries to reconcile with Sai, though their relationship remains unresolved at the end of the novel. So friends, when this robbery happens, after that, Gyan feels guilty. He tries to reconcile Sai, he tries to console Sai, but the relation is now, let's say, not tightly knit. There are gaps which emerged in the behavior of Gyan and Sai. So the relationship remains unresolved by the end of the story. Gyan, like Sai, holds some hypocritical views because he enjoys tea parties and cheese toast with her, but he also recognizes that these British imports are byproducts of a system that has led to his own subjugation. So friends, when Sai used to meet Gyan at her house, Gyan used to behave like, let's say, Europeans. He used to have tea parties and cheese toast with her. But there is, in the core of his heart, there is the guilt consciousness that he is behaving like an elite and he is not behaving like an Indian, like a local Nepali. Ultimately, Gyan is the character reckoning with generations worth of systematic oppression, which becomes personal when it leads to his own coming of age process. So friends, we can say that the personality of Gyan is reflecting a character which is reckoning with generations, a kind of oppression. These Nepalis, they were being oppressed by the, let's say, local Indians in that area. And that oppression reaches to the sudden outburst when Gyan beats Sai at his house. So, the things which were professional between Sai and Gyan, they became personal at the end of the story, which ruins their love relationship. We have another character in the story whose name is Nimmy. Nimmy is Judge's wife and Sai's maternal grandmother. She is 14 when she married the judge. The two do not consummate their marriage before the judge leaves for university because Nimmy is so terrified that they share one affectionate bicycle ride before he leaves. So, the Nimmy and the judge, they had no, let's say, relationship initially when they were married to each other. They had one bicycle ride as a, let's say, remembrance of their marriage. After that, judge leaves to Cambridge. However, when the judge returns, he begins to expect her to relinquish her culture as he has done. Now friends, the condition of judge in Cambridge was very critical. He returned back with new manners which are European. He expected his wife to behave in those European manners, but she refused to relinquish or adapt that kind of culture. He becomes angry when Nimmy steals his powder puff and he rapes her as punishment. Friends, after, let's say, listening to this incident, don't you feel that judge is not in true sense a European in thinking? The Europeans, the Britishers, they believed in giving equal, let's say, importance to females. But judge has a sense of dominance over females. He dominated her wife by raping her. So judge is a hypocrite. He has not learned the European culture with true sense. He then begins a cycle of abuse trying to get her to conform to English culture. So he keep on beating her because he expected her to behave like Britishers. Eventually, after Nimmy is accidentally a part of Nehru's welcoming committee for the Indian National Congress, the judge sends her away because she has humiliated him and he fears that he will kill her in anger. On one day, Nimmy goes to an Indian National Congress meeting and judge thinks that he is going to kill her. So he sends her, throws her away from his life. Nimmy then has a daughter, Saeed's mother, and spends the rest of her life living with her sister before she catches on fire from the stove. It is implied that her sister's husband may have caused this accident. So, Nimmy, she was abandoned, then she started living with her sister, and we can assume that the husband of Nimmy's sister did not like the Nimmy's presence at his house. So he created one accident where the Nimmy is burnt, shown that she is burnt due to accident, but he set a fire on her. Nimmy becomes an embodiment of the Indian culture from which the judge is attempting to separate himself. So when we talk about the personality of Nimmy, we understand that Nimmy is the representative of true Indian culture. She did not want to leave that. She was proud Indian, but the judge was not. We have another character in the story whose name is Noni. One of the judge's neighbors, Lola's sister and Saeed's first tutor when she arrived at CHOOU. She and Lola are upper-class Bengali women who have also assimilated many parts of British and Western cultures, such as celebrating Christmas, reading Jane Austen, and listening to the BBC. So, this lady Noni, she has a sister Lola. They used to, let's say, live with each other. They were upper-class Bengali women, and they used to listen to BBC, they used to celebrate Christmas, they read Jane Austen, etc. Noni becomes a mother figure for Sai in many ways. So, Noni was the first tutor, so there was an association between Noni and Sai. Noni has never been in love and counsels Sai to take life's chancery as they come and to avoid being stuck in an environment in which time does not seem to move forward. So we can see that Noni, she has never been in love. She counsels Sai for her life, and thus she wants Sai to move forward in her life. We have another character whose name is Lola. She is Noni's sister. She and Noni live in house which had belonged to Lola and her late husband Joydeep before he suddenly died of a heart attack. Lola is more opinionated than her sister, holding strong negative stereotypes of the Nepalis and enforcing India's rigid caste structure. Now this lady Lola, she hated Nepalis and Nepali culture. She wanted to prove herself as a protector of Indian classical culture and caste system. So she was a rigid person. She believes that there should be strict divisions between servants and upper class people. So Lola was a class conscious lady. She wanted to separate the servant's identity from the master's. Her daughter Pixie is a reporter for the BBC, suggesting that like Noni and many of the judge's other neighbors, she has also brought about into the cultural superiority of the British. So, Noni has a daughter whose name is Pixie. She is working as a reporter in BBC. So, the complete, let's say, home environment of Noni and Lola, that is, let's say, of European culture and British superiority. We have another character in the story whose name is Father Bhuti. Another of the judge's neighbor, Father Bhuti, is a Swiss priest who runs a dairy farm. It is implied that he is in some kind of relationship with Uncle Potty. So, we can understand that this person, Father Bhuti, he is in some kind of relationship with Uncle Potty. That is not disclosed. Over the course of the novel, it is discovered that Father Bhuti is actually in India illegally and should not own property. So, Father Bhuti was also an illegal immigrant. He came from Switzerland, but he do not have the permission to live in India. He is told he must leave the country immediately, and so he becomes an odd and accidental victim of the GNLF movement. So, in this GNLF movement, there was a, let's say, police investigation against him, and thus he was sent back to his country. We have another character whose name is Uncle Potty, the judge's nearest neighbor, the gentleman farmer and a drunk. So he was a farmer, he always used to drink. It is heavily implied that he is in relationship with Father Bhuti. He is well educated and from a well-known family, and so Lola and Noni put up with him even though they consider him to be less cultured than they are. So, Lola and Noni, they used to talk to Uncle Potty, although they thought that Uncle Potty is not much cultured and not much civilized. We have another character in the story whose name is Saeed. One of Biju's co-worker at the Queen of Tarts bakery. Saeed is a Muslim man from Zanzibar, and Biju comes to admire him for his resilience and his ability to not only survive but also thrive as an underdocumented immigrant. So, Saeed was also working as a servant in that Queen of Tarts bakery with this person, Biju, and they had a friendly relationship with each other, and Biju used to appreciate him because he was also an undocumented immigrant like Biju. Eventually, Saeed convinces a young hippie woman to marry him and sponsor him for a green card, which Biju sees as the loftiest of goals in America. So, after some time, Saeed marries, let's say, young hippie women, and this is how he gets a green card of America, because that woman was an American native. We have another character whose name is Harish Hari, the owner of Gandhi's Cafe, the last restaurant in which Biju works. Harish Hari uses globalization to his advantage in selling generic Indian food to Americans. So Harish Hari, he sells generic Indian food to Americans, projecting that this restaurant is a true Indian spirit. Though he is kind to Biju, he also takes advantage of him and refuses to pay for a doctor when Biju is injured in the restaurant. So Harish Hari, he was not, let's say, from outward he is sympathetic towards Biju, but not from core of his heart. We have another character who is the judge's father. Like the cook does for Biju, the judge's father works hard to allow the judge to get the best education and improve his social class. However, when he sees that the judge has completely forsaken Indian culture, he says that the judge has become like a stranger to him and the rest of the family. The judge, for his own part, becomes ashamed of his father and the culture in which he was brought up. So friends, we see that the judge's father, he put all his effort to earn money and send his son to the foreign country. But when the son came back, he felt that his father is a, let's say, very, let's say, Indian, which he do not want to live with. The judge expected him as superior to his father, elite to his father. So the judge became ashamed of his father when he came back to India. We have another character in the story who is Bose. The judge's only friend after he graduates from Cambridge. Bose is Indian but also strove to hid himself to his Indian culture in the hopes of being accepted by the British. So, Bose was a friend of Judge. He was also graduated from Cambridge, and he, let's say, tried to present the Indian culture from his personality. When he and the judge reunites for the final lunch, however, Bose has come to realize how mistaken they were to idealize the culture that oppressed them so thoroughly. So, initially Bose was the appreciator of European culture, but finally he realized with the judge that these are the people who will never treat Indians equal to them, and they will keep on exploiting Indians. We have another character in the story who is Saeed's father. Name is Mr. Mistry. An orphan himself and a member of the Indian Air Force. He and Saeed's mother traveled to Moscow for him to be interviewed for the space program, but the couple is hit by a bus when they are crossing the street, leaving Saeed to be taken care of by her grandfather. So, Saeed's father, he was a very, let's say, optimistic person. He wanted her daughter to, let's say, join the space program in Moscow, but in one accident he and his wife passed away and Saeed was sent to her grandfather's house. So friends, here is one more chart, flow chart, which I have prepared at the last of this slide. If you look at this flow chart, there are characters like Judge, then Saeed, Biju, Cook, Harish Hari, Saeed, Gyan, with their characteristics and their relationship with each other. So if you look at this chart, you will see that all these characters came to meet each other because of their destiny. The destiny which let's say had enforced them and to tightly knit their, let's say, relationship with each other. So I hope that the characterization and how these characters are associated and involved and interfered into each other's life is, let's say, well portrayed into this presentation. That is all for today. Thank you for listening.